Hey everybody, it's Innovision, and what a time to be alive. We now can install SteamOS on our ARM-based gaming handhelds. We have a couple of options now, and one of the latest ones is Armada SteamOS. One of the things that sets Armada apart from Rocknix is the fact that it boots straight into SteamOS Game Mode UI. And the feature I'm most hyped about is that it's got a fully working KDE desktop environment. That means you can do some mild productivity work, you've got access to Firefox, and so many other applications. In today's video, I'll be sharing the features I'm most hyped about, I'll share some gameplay examples, and I'll be showing you how to dual boot Android with Armada using either your SD memory card or the internal storage. Grab you something to snack on, something to sip on, because we've got a lot to unpack here. So you can see we're in SteamOS right now. So this button right here acts as the Steam button, and this button acts as the quick access menu. And if we take a look at our settings, one thing to notice is that Armada targets the beta update channel. By default, it does have over-the-air updates, but it's still not widely tested. The software is still considered experimental. But if we go down all the way down here, we can see we're running Fedora. While Armada is a variant of SteamOS, it's more similar to Bazzite than it is Valve's SteamOS, which is based on the Arch Linux distribution. You can see we're on Linux kernel 7, and then this is where things get really interesting. We're on an ARM64 CPU. We're clocked at 3.5 gigahertz. We see the number of physical cores, and then we see the Adreno-based driver, and we're running with Mesa 4.6. We've got 7 gigs of VRAM. So this particular model has 16 gigs of RAM total. But in general, this looks and feels and behaves just like Valve SteamOS. This distribution as a whole is more similar to Bazzite. Let's take a look at some gameplay of TMNT Splintered Fate. This game came out, I think, November of 2025. It originally was an Apple arcade game, and then it came to the Switch, and then finally PC. And so while it's not a demanding game, it's still a modern PC game. This is a game that didn't take much fuss to get up and running. For those of you not familiar with this game, it's a roguelike game. You don't really get to keep any of your items in between runs. If your characters die during the run, you have to start all over again. So I'm in the middle of a run here, so let's see if we can find something interesting, some bad guys to go fight. And you can see we're pretty close to 100 FPS as we're playing the game. These are smaller environments, so it's not a big open world game. This game looks beautiful and plays very smooth. All right, we get a power up. Tool charges 50% faster. I'll take the 80 scrap. That way I can buy some. Oh, we made it to the boss. Oh, it's a mini boss. Overall, this game handles great. It plays very smooth. I have no complaints whatsoever. This is a game that I could play on a long flight or car ride without any problem, and I'd have plenty of battery life because these ARM-based systems have incredible battery life. I really can't wait for them to make versions of these handhelds with larger screens. I'm not trying to have the most epic, ultimate AAA gaming experience while I'm on the go. For that, I prefer to be on my gaming PC. And you can see we can adjust our display brightness, no problem. One of the things I truly admire about this distribution, it comes with Decky Loader already pre-installed. It comes with its own Decky Loader plugin called Armada Control. And it gives you the ability to tweak parameters on a per game basis. So I can go in here, pick the game, let's say Shadow of Mordor, Middle Earth. I'll select that game, and then I'll go into the presets. So I'm using a custom effects preset. Typically, you'll want to use the default unless you really know what you're doing. And then you can adjust things like the fan curve, CPU underclocking, and you can even adjust based on the performance profile. I know you've been eyeing my Lloyd's Titan mech. My best buddy built it for me. I just want to say thank you, buddy. Let's take a look at Shadow of Mordor gameplay. Now, this is one of the more demanding games for this handheld. We're not able to lock it in at 60 FPS, but we're able to hover at the mid 40 FPS range, so the game's totally playable. If I go and start using the performance profile here, the game will run at 60 FPS, but just the fans are very loud on this device, and that's not enjoyable to me. I'd rather it be a little bit quiet with less performance. I've got this custom preset. Most of them are low, And then I've tweaked a couple of the settings. I'm using the full panel resolution of the Odin 3, 1920 by 1080, and I'm not using any resolution scaling. If I reduce the resolution scale by about 25%, I also can keep up at 60 FPS, but I just like how the game looks better without the resolution scaling. So this game is actually running off the internal storage. I try to give it as much performance as I can. And you see here, once we drop down to this area, we're dipping into the high 30 FPS range, but we stay, around 40 to 45 FPS, depending on what we're looking at. And you see here in this combat sequence, we're staying at about 50 FPS. The gameplay is very smooth. I don't feel any stutters. And that matters a lot for a game like this because the animations during the fighting, if it stutters, it's going to mess up how your game plays and it'll frustrate you as a player. All right, let's kick it up a bit. I'm going to turn on the performance preset. You'll probably hear the fans here in just a second. But I just want to demonstrate, we can comfortably stay above 60 FPS if we give it a little bit more juice. Yeah, so here we're pretty close to 60 FPS. Just so you know, we have a community Discord server that's free for our subscribers. So hit that subscribe button and hop on over to Discord. That's where all the cool cats hang out. And some of the best conversations take place. Let's take a look at some gameplay of Once Upon a Katamari. This is a game that just came out less than a year ago. Again, it's not a very demanding game, but it's nice that it's a new game that I can play on a handheld like this. I mean, this really is a mini Steam Deck. While it can't replace your Steam Deck, I think it does something different. It's ultra portable, it has incredible battery life. So it looks like out here in the main world, we're hovering around 90 to 100 FPS, but there's a lot of dips, it dips down to about 80 FPS. The question is, while we're rolling up our Katamari, is it going to feel the same or is it going to feel janky? So the first thing you'll notice that in this environment, it's a lot more detailed. There's a lot more polygons being rendered on the screen. There's a lot of shapes that are having to be texture mapped. So there's a lot more going on here, and we're still staying at 60 FPS. I'm not using the performance setting. I'm using balanced right now. One thing to note is I am using the fast effects preset right here. If you go under the power profile here, you'll see that I'm using balanced, and it's got a moderate fan curve, medium CPU underclock, starts at 60% GPU. So I would say that this is pretty good in terms of power utilization. Look at this, in this lower part of the level, it seems that we picked up FPS. We're now hovering around 75 FPS. When we started at the top, there's a lot more stuff below us, so maybe that was affecting drawing at a distance. Not only is this playable, this is actually an enjoyable way to play it. If I didn't have the holder installed on this is a very small console. I could see someone being able to just fit this in their backpack or their purse without any problem. For most people, I'd recommend sticking with the SD card installation process because it leaves your Android installation intact and doesn't require factory resetting your Android, and it's the simplest way to get things up and running. Later in the video, I'll be sharing how to install it to the internal storage for those of you out there who want the absolute best performance. Out of respect for the developers and the quality work they've done with Armada, I want to make it very clear that this software is in its early stages and it's not feature complete yet. One required step in this installation, regardless if you choose to install the SD memory card or internal storage, is to install a custom bootloader. The custom bootloader is required to be able to boot into Linux. And in order to get the custom bootloader installed, you have to run a script as root under Android. And you have to take great care that you use the correct script that matches your device system on chip. If you use the wrong script, you may brick your device. I'm providing these steps for educational purposes, and I assume no responsibility if anything goes wrong should you attempt these steps and something fail. First thing we're going to want to do is head over to the Armada GitHub page. And on the right-hand side here, you can see releases. So we're going to click into there. And once you click into releases, you'll see the latest release. So I'm using one from June 28th. One thing to call out here, the project maintainer, Virtudude, he's just calling out that this is a preview. things may be buggy, they may not work as expected. I'm going to click on this Armada June 28th image, and it's going to start downloading. Once it's done downloading, we'll need to unpack it. So Armada has finished downloading. The next thing we're going to want to do is flash the image to a 64 gig or larger SD memory card. And they recommend using A2 speed for the best results. So I'm going to head over to my downloads, and I'm using P7zip, which is an implementation of 7zip to be able to open this, but I'm just clicking on the archive, and inside there you'll see a disk.raw, and you'll just drag it into your downloads folder here to extract it. All right, and it finished extracting. Next thing we're going to want to do is launch a program like Balena Etcher or Rufus. So I'm using Balena Etcher. With Balena Etcher open, we're going to click Flash from File, and I'm looking for that disk.raw that we just extracted. So I'm going to click on that. I'm going to go ahead and plug in my SD memory card, and I'm going to select target, and it shows up here as generic SD memory card because it's hooked up through a USB adapter. I'm going to go ahead and select that. I'm going to click Flash, and saying, hey, are you sure you want to use this? It's a pretty large drive. I'm like, yep, I'm sure. And we'll let this run its course. This will take, anywhere between 7 to 10 minutes, depending on the speed of your SD card. At this point, I've created my SD memory card, I've booted into Android, and I'm using the native built-in File Explorer to view the files on my SD memory card. And in there's a directory called rocknix_abl. Each one of these folders corresponds to a different system on chip or SoC revision. This step is extremely important. You must ensure that you're copying the right version that matches your SoC, and there's a table over on the Armada GitHub page. If you use the wrong one, you may end up bricking your device. In order to run the update bootloader script, we're going into Android system settings, and then under Odin settings, we're looking for the option to run the script as root. This may be different if you're on a different device brand. And so we're going to select the script, and we're looking for that flash_abl.sh that's located in our root directory on the internal storage, and we click run. And we're done. We now have a modified bootloader. At this point, we've flashed our SD memory card with the Armada latest build. We've already booted into Android and run the bootloader script as root. The next thing we're going to want to do is now boot off of that memory card. I'm holding volume down and pushing the power button. And once it boots up, we're going to use the volume up and down keys to navigate this menu. This will start, and if you look at start mode, it's a little bit hard to see because the text is so small, but it says Android. So we're going to want to navigate to the option set device model. So now that that option's selected, I'm going to tap the power button. And so the very first option here is the Odin 3. And I'm going to go ahead and push the button for that. But you'd go through and pick your device model from this list of supported devices. So I push that. I now have the right device model. And now I want to change boot mode. Switch boot mode. And so right now you see it's set to Android. And now it's set to Linux. And now when I hit start, it's going to start booting off of the SD memory card. And I also enabled debugging in my bootloader just because I want to see everything that's going on. So this takes about a minute, and then we'll be greeted with the typical SteamOS onboarding UI. And what's neat is you can actually run this whole thing entirely off the SD memory card, or you can install it to internal storage. And once you've entered your Wi-Fi password, it'll download the update and reboot. You can scan your QR code to get logged in. All right, and we are in. So at this point, you can just start using your device like normal if you just want to boot off of the SD memory card. At this point, I've shared how to create the Armada SD memory card, how to install the custom bootloader required for booting into Linux, how to boot into SteamOS, and several gameplay examples. For the remainder of the video, I'll be sharing how to install Armada to your internal storage. That way you can dual boot Android and Armada both off of the internal storage. I'll also be sharing a workaround to get the SD memory card working under Armada. That way you can have additional storage under Armada SteamOS. And finally, I'll be sharing the process for uninstalling Armada. For anyone who's seriously considering installing to the internal storage, I recommend you watch the whole section on installing to the internal storage and uninstalling Armada in its entirety before even attempting it. This requires more advanced knowledge of Linux and Android. All right, let's do it. You also have the option to install it to the internal storage, which is a whole order of magnitude faster than SD memory cards, and that's actually what I'm about to do next. Even when you install Armada to internal storage, Android will still be there, and you can still dual boot. I'm actually going to use up all my space, leaving the smallest amount of space for Android, but you can actually split it up the way you want, or if you don't want to affect your internal storage at all, you can just keep booting off the SD memory card. And so now I'm going to head over to desktop mode. And you do this just like you would on a Steam Deck or any device that's running SteamOS. You go to power and then switch to desktop. And this is running KDE desktop just like it would be on Bazzite or SteamOS. So one thing I want to do just to make my life a little bit easier, these screens are small and it hurts my eyes. This will never be my main handheld gaming device, but it's fun to tinker with. And it's good if you're on a long flight. These things get really nice battery life. So I'm increasing my UI scale. And I want to switch to dark mode theme. There we go. All right, so that's a little bit easier on the eyes. You'll go to start, and then you'll go to system, and then you'll select Armada installer. All right, so one thing to keep in mind, if you install Armada, it's going to factory reset your Android installation. So this will make you lose all of your Android data and apps. Again, if you don't want to lose your Android data or apps and you don't want to install to the internal storage, you can just keep it running off the SD memory card. What I'm planning to do here is actually run some of the more difficult to run games off of the internal storage, and then some of my lighter indie titles like Ball Pit. So one thing to keep in mind, if you want the maximum Android storage, this would give 402 gigs to Android and give about 33 to Armada. Or I can have Android just have 8 and give the rest to Armada. So I think I'm just going to go with 32 gigs for Android, and then that gives me about 403 gigs for Armada. And here we go. We can see our allocation here. So Android will have 32 gigs and Armada will have 403. And that means that I can still tinker with Android and see what's going on that half. But the reality is I'm going to be spending most of my time in Linux. And go ahead and click install. We just let it run its courses here. All right, it is done. And so I'm going to power off. With it powered off, you'll want to remove your SD card. I'm actually going to leave mine in there, but ejected. And now we're going to turn it on. And now we're booting off of the internal storage. We're going to have to onboard again. Once you've entered your Wi-Fi password, you'll be downloading updates again. All right, we're back in, and now we're going to scan a QR code, get logged in. But one thing I want to do just to get everything up and running the way I like, I'm going to switch over to my desktop. I'm about to format my SD memory card. So remember, I left it kind of popped out here. I'm going to go ahead and pop it in. First thing we're going to want to do is install gparted. So I've typed in my terminal here, sudo space rpm-ostree space install space gparted. I'm going to hit enter, and now it's asking for the password, and the default password in Armada is Armada. So I'm going to type in Armada, and it's going through and downloading some dependencies. All right, and now I have to reboot. If we go under System, now we have gparted. And this is going to allow me to delete the file system that's on my SD memory card and install a new one. It helps to have a mouse and keyboard if you have a dock. And so we can see here this dev mmcblk. It's a memory card block device. So I'm going to go to Device, create partition table. I want to use GPT. And I'm going to click Apply. And we have a bunch of unallocated space right now. And so I'm just going to go ahead and create a partition. You can pick ext4 or btrfs. I'm going to go with btrfs, and it's a primary partition. I'm going to go ahead and click Add, and then I can click this check mark right here. It's going to format this SD memory card as btrfs. This takes a couple minutes. All right, and it's done formatting. I can close out of this. Now I'm going to share with you a neat little trick, but first I need to install Firefox. I would say this is one of the big benefits of Armada over Rocknix, for example. The fact that we can go to the bazaar and download apps is incredible. It's like having a full-fledged Linux desktop experience. All right, so I'm going to go over here and search for Firefox. I'm going to go here and get it. Firefox downloaded. I'm going to go ahead and open it. I'm searching for a GitHub repository called SteamOS-mount-tool. And I'm just going to go ahead and clone this. And I'll provide links in the description of the video. We can just open our file manager. And I'm going to double click this easymounttool.desktop. I'm going to go to launch. And it's asking for our root password. And we get a list of all the available disks. And you can see here, number 7 is our BTRFS formatted SD memory card. And so I'm just going to type in number 7 and hit enter. And we can name it whatever we want. I'm going to name it SD card. So in order to get the auto mounting to work finally, you have to change the ownership of the SD memory card to your current SteamOS user. And so you'll type in sudo space chown space dash uppercase R space $ user space var mnt slash SD card. And then you'll hit enter, and it's going to ask for our password. And once it's done running, you now can access the memory card. This last step is critical. It's going to pull it all together. We need to add this storage device to our Steam client. So with the Steam client opened in desktop mode, I'm navigating to the storage section, and you see we've got a drop down right there where we can click and we can add another device. And I'm going to add my micro SD card. And now all we have to do is reboot and our SD card will show up in game mode. All right, so you decided for whatever reason you want to uninstall Armada. We'll hold volume down, tap the power button, and leave our finger on volume down. We're greeted with the bootloader. And you can just leave it here on this bootloader screen, and we're going to connect our device to our computer. The only assumption that's made is that you have a PC, Mac, or Linux machine that's got ADB or Android Debug Bridge already installed, set up, and working. I'm not covering that in this video today. That's a different topic. With the Android Debug Bridge installed and up and running, we're going to now run some commands from our console to start erasing Rocknix. So the first thing we have to do is erase it from the bootloader. Then we're going to have to boot off of an SD memory card that's been formatted with the Rocknix installer. And then we're going to have to go into the desktop environment and click uninstall from there. So we've got our console here, and I'm going to type in ADB devices. It might not show up here because it's running in fast boot. Yeah, so we don't see it right here. We could type in fast boot devices and it should show up. There it is. So that's my Odin. I'm copying from the Armada GitHub page this command, fastboot erase Rocknix. This is a misnomenclature. It's actually going to be erasing Armada, but it uses some of the tooling put together by the Rocknix team. And so I'm just going to hit enter, and it's done erasing it. The next thing we're going to do is boot off of an SD memory card that's got Armada already installed on it. And we're going to go into the desktop environment and erase Armada from there. So I'm back with a freshly formatted SD card with the Armada installation. I've got my bootloader mode set to Linux. And the way this works is if there's already a Linux on disk or on the internal storage, it's going to always boot that first. And so that's why we had to erase it using the ADB commands. Now with the internal Linux being removed from the bootloader, the fallback option is the SD memory card. So now I'm just going to click boot. And we're just going to wait for it to boot into the live Linux environment from the memory card. All right, and we're back, and we just have to complete this SteamOS onboarding. All right, so we're going to go into desktop mode. All right, we're going to go to Start, System, and then Armada Installer. And so we've got a few options here. We've got Remove and Restore Android, Reinstall Armada, or Cancel. And the option you want to use if you want to remove Armada is the Remove and Restore Android. So we'll click that, click Remove. And just like that, it took a couple seconds. And we can click Power Off. Since I still have my boot mode set to Linux and it's booting off the SD memory card, it's going to boot back into Armada. But at any point in time, you can switch the boot mode to Android and you're back to Android, and it will be just like you factory reset the Android side. How many of you out there are planning to install Armada or already have? Drop a comment, let me know, let's have a discussion about it. I don't know about you, but Armada is one of the distros to be keeping an eye on. I'm already seeing pull requests going in for adding the additional screen for AYN Thor devices, as well as fixing RGB lighting on the Odin. There's so many amazing code changes already coming down the pipeline. Until next time, hit the like button on the video, subscribe, and hype. That way you don't miss all the amazing tech, toys, and gaming tips we've got coming down the pipeline.